see the video.
No.
Whoa, 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 whoa! Gun on the floor. Take the stairs, go down now!
The movie begins with Detective Frank from the Homicide Division starting his day. His daughter, Sam, calls him from afar, where she lives with her mother. She invites him to visit for an important event, and he promises to attend. He also mentions having a gift for her, but keeps it a surprise. After the call, Frank teams up with his colleague, Slater, and they head out to question someone. Slater warns Frank to avoid reckless behavior that could complicate their mission. They arrive at a port to interrogate a worker named Jimmy. However, Jimmy resists, pulls out a gun, and takes a co-worker hostage. He fires wildly at Frank and Slater before fleeing. Frank chases him through a maze of shipping containers, dodging bullets as Jimmy fires randomly. When Jimmy's gun runs out of bullets, he sprints to the main road to escape, but gets struck and killed by a passing car. Frank also collides with the car, hitting his head and bleeding from his ears. The story jumps to several months later. Frank now uses a hearing aid because the accident damaged his cochlea, severely impairing his hearing. One day at work, Sam video calls him, showing that she's learning sign language to communicate with him. She invites him to her recital next week, but Frank declines, saying he can't handle the noise of a crowd. Sam pleads with him to come, but their conversation is interrupted when Frank's hearing aid begins ringing loudly. He can no longer hear his daughter's voice, so he hangs up. Later, Frank visits the doctor to check on his condition. After running some tests, the doctor tells him that his cochlea has deteriorated significantly, and his hearing has dropped by 80%. She warns him to avoid loud noises, as they could make him permanently deaf. She also urges him to prepare for the worst and continue learning sign language, as it may be essential for future communication. In the evening, Frank goes back to work and is assigned to investigate a double homicide involving drug dealers in Hyde Park. The victims were shot at close range, but there are no witnesses, only reports of gunshots. Frank speaks with the local man who found the bodies, but he struggles to hear him clearly. The noise from the helicopter's beacon, the camera, and the siren overwhelms him, giving him a headache. Frustrated, Frank retreats to the car, unable to handle the chaos any longer. The next evening, dejected Frank drinks alone at the bar until his co-worker Slater suddenly shows up. Frank adjusts his hearing aid to hear him better. Slater, now working in the narcotics division after transferring from homicide, tries to comfort Frank. He tells him that many disabled police officers still perform their jobs well. However, Frank admits he feels useless and is even considering quitting. Hearing this, Slater suggests a job that might suit Frank's condition. He mentions a new lead in the Hyde Park case. A witness has come forward, but she is deaf. Slater asks Frank to act as the interpreter since the official interpreter is on leave until next week. Frank hesitates, admitting he isn't fluent in sign language, but Slater insists. Reluctantly, Frank agrees. The witness, a 33-year-old woman named Eva, was at the scene of the murder but waited 2 days before contacting the police. The next day, Frank and Slater visit Eva's address and notice her building is mostly empty. When they reach her apartment, Frank attempts to communicate with her, but his clumsy sign language irritates her. Expecting a professional interpreter, Eva refuses to cooperate. Frank explains he's just an old dog trying to learn new tricks after his accident, and she eventually agrees to let them in. Eva reveals that she's preparing to move out because the building owner has evicted all the residents to turn the place into luxury condos. Slater asks her about the incident in Hyde Park, and Eva explains that although she's deaf, she can read lips. She shares that on the night of the incident, she went outside to take some pictures. She saw a group of people fighting and started recording the scene. Eva shows the cops the video, which ends with 2 people being shot. The cops are shocked by the footage, and Slater takes her phone as evidence, promising to return it soon. Eva expresses her fear that the murderers will kill her if they find out she spoke to the police. Frank reassures her that he won't let anything happen to her. Later, in the bathroom, Frank notices some medications on a shelf. As they prepare to leave, Slater mentions that he checked Eva's files and learned she had been to rehab. Frank points out that he saw naloxone, a drug used to treat overdoses, in her bathroom. This leads Frank to believe that Eva wasn't outside that night just to take pictures but was likely seeking drugs. In the next scene, the cops drive off separately, with Slater taking Eva's phone as evidence. Shortly after, Frank realizes he left his phone at Eva's apartment and decides to go back. Meanwhile, the people involved in the Hyde Park shooting arrive at Eva's place, led by their boss, Mason. Mason stations a guard on the ground floor while he and the others head upstairs. After a while, Frank returns to the apartment and sees a man guarding Eva's door. Finding it strange but staying calm, he casually walks past the man. Frank then sneaks upstairs using the emergency staircase and quietly approaches Eva's window from outside. He sees Mason interrogating a terrified Eva, who writes on a piece of paper and pleads for them not to hurt her. Frank tries to listen, but his hearing aid's battery is running low. Mason asks Eva if anyone else has seen the video she recorded. Eva firmly says no, but Mason doesn't believe her and prepares to kill her with an injection. With no other choice, Frank breaks the window and enters. He grabs guns from Mason and his henchman, Angel, threatening to kill them if they resist. Suddenly, another of Mason's men enters with a gun, triggering a shootout. Frank accidentally shoots Angel during the chaos. Taking advantage of the commotion, Frank and Eva manage to escape. Furious, Mason orders his men to spread out and block all exits to trap them. Frank and Eva hide in an empty apartment. Eva wonders how the criminals found her and why they came after her only after she gave the video to the police. Frank realizes there must be a mole in the police force who leaked her information. He accuses Eva of going out that night not to take photos but to buy drugs. Eva denies this, insisting she no longer uses drugs. She explained she had gone out that night to celebrate because a gallery had offered to showcase her photos. Eva reported the incident 2 days late because she was scared. One of the victims was her former drug dealer. Meanwhile, Frank stepped outside, hoping to find a resident with a phone to call the police. After he left, Eva waved to a resident in a nearby building for help, but no one noticed her. Then, she spotted a police car in the parking lot and thought help had arrived. To her shock, she realized the officers were working with the gangsters. A medic arrived to treat Angel, who had been shot earlier, while Mason helped. Suddenly, Mason found Frank's phone and realized Frank must be searching for a phone to call the police. Alarmed, he ordered his men and the corrupt officers to search every room for Frank and Eva. He also instructed them to intercept any 911 calls from the building and redirect them to their lines. Frank returned to Eva empty-handed after failing to find a phone. She told him about the cops collaborating with the gangsters. Shocked, Frank realized Mason was a corrupt cop working with the drug dealers and could anticipate their every move. Determined, Frank came up with a plan and rushed to the elevator. Meanwhile, the villains, monitoring the CCTV feeds, spotted Eva and Frank on the 6th floor. The duo searches desperately for the emergency intercom inside the elevator. Frank frantically calls for help through it, asking the operator to contact Detective Slater, the only person he trusts. But only automated responses echo back. They try to leave the elevator, but are attacked by cops, forcing them to retreat inside. Meanwhile, Mason learns about Frank's location and rushes toward the elevator, leaving the apartment unguarded. Frank quickly disables the CCTV and presses random buttons to confuse the gangsters. The two escape to the 10th floor and enter Eva's apartment to retrieve Frank's phone. There, they find Angel with the medic. The medic refuses to help, saying it's not her responsibility. Angel calls Mason for help, but Eva knocks him out. The duo steals Angel's phone and hides in another room. By the time Mason and his team arrive, they discover the theft and try to make a call. Eva reads Mason's lips and silences the phone to stay undetected. Frank texts Slater and asks him to call the stolen phone. However, the noise alerts Mason to their presence, and the duo flees through the window. They enter a stairwell and sneak into another apartment to hide. While there, They receive a video call from an unknown number. It's Slater. Frank's hearing aid battery dies completely, leaving him unable to hear anything. Eva steps in to help by reading Slater's lips. Frank explains the situation to his friend, and Slater promises to bring reinforcements after listening carefully. Just then, Mason and his team discover their location and launch another attack. Acting quickly, Frank and Eva open a window and sneak into the next room. While escaping, Eva suddenly stops and asks how the gangsters knew where they were. Frank realizes they're being tracked through Angel's phone. He wraps the phone in his shirt and throws it to the ground floor. The corrupt cops and henchmen rush downstairs, only to find it's a trick. Frustrated, Mason orders his men to search every door in the building and kill them both. Meanwhile, Frank and Eva hide, but soon see Slater arriving in the building, alone and without reinforcements. Frank worries for his clever friend and decides to help him. They reach the lobby and find a gangster holding Slater at gunpoint. With no other option, Frank surrenders his weapon. But as soon as he does, Slater grabs it and points it at him. In a shocking twist, Slater reveals he's part of the corrupt gang and the mole in the police force Frank had suspected. Annoyed, Slater demands to know why Frank returned to the building and played the hero. Mason and his men inject drugs into Eva's hand, making her pass out. They plan to overdose her and frame it as a suicide. Slater then tries to bribe Frank to stay silent and join their gang. With no other choice, Frank reluctantly agrees. The villains are satisfied and leave Eva's unconscious body in her room before taking Frank with them and heading for the elevator. Inside the elevator, Frank seizes the cop's gun, presses the button to close the door, and traps them inside. He rushes back to Eva's room and injects her with naloxone he found in her bathroom. Eva wakes up but warns Frank that the effects will only last 10 minutes before she passes out again. Meanwhile, Mason orders his men to search the building, block all exits, and prepare to kill Frank. Frank hands Eva the gun, telling her to shoot anyone who comes through the window. He pours petrol around the room and lights a fire. Thick smoke quickly rises, drawing the attention of pedestrians below. Within moments, police cars and fire trucks arrive, forcing most of Mason's men to flee. Mason, still outside, climbs through the window into the apartment, determined to find Frank and Eva. He moves swiftly toward the bathroom, ready for confrontation. Suddenly, the duo pours acetone on him, causing him to scream in pain, and then runs away. Despite the pain, a determined Mason refuses to give up and forces Slater to help him track them down. The duo keeps running and eventually enters a musician's apartment with a music studio. Slater and Mason follow them in, but Mason's vision is blurry from the acetone. As Slater enters a room, Eva and Frank blast metal music at an ear-piercing volume, causing Slater's eardrums to burst. He stumbles out, and Mason, unable to see clearly, accidentally shoots him. Mason grows frustrated when he realizes what he's done and walks away. Soon, Slater dies, and Eva's naloxone wears off, causing her to lose consciousness. Frank, worried, tries to revive her, but hears someone coming. He quickly hides. Mason arrives and is shocked to see the unconscious woman. Suddenly, Frank sneaks up behind him and knocks him out with a guitar. Frank then carries Eva and rushes out of the burning building. He hands her to the ambulance crew, who revive her as he watches anxiously. The scene cuts to the future, where Frank attends his daughter's recital. Eva arrives and sits beside him, taking his hand. She survived, and now it seems they are in a relationship. And that's how the movie ends. What did you think of this movie? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and press the bell icon for more amazing videos. See you next time.